Welcome. This is the AIA 2023 conference preparation for women in architecture. We are going to be doing a networking session at the conference in November, and Molly is one of our panelists and collaborators on this session, and we are excited to talk with her today. This session is focused around finding meaning in and beyond practice, because sometimes we just need a moment to step back and really think about what is driving our practice, what is driving our lives, and is that in alignment with our true values? Again, my name is Katie Kangas, Pask Architecture, and I'm here with Kaitlin.
Hi everyone, this is Kaitlin Schalow, architect currently at HGA and current co-chair of Women in Architecture.
And we are very excited to be here with Molly. Molly, tell us a bit about yourself, your role, your title, where you're practicing.
Hi, and thanks again for the opportunity to participate. I'm Molly Eagan. I'm an architect and sustainable design analyst. Since 2020, I've been working with my own sustainable design consultancy, which is called Cause. I think, almost anyone who's started a business, my intent has really been to kind of fill a gap that I've seen in the industry. The need for architects to build greater fluency in building performance issues. And so my background is as an architect, but somebody who's now dug deep into kind of the technical side of environmental design and building performance. Ultimately, that's been the direction of my career.
Love it. And I love how you've taken that leap into your own practice. And some of the other people on our panel have done the same thing. So it's interesting to have that mix and to see how that passion has led to you starting your own firm. Where have you been finding inspiration lately?
In the world of climate change, in the career of climate change, there's really no shortage of inspiration there. You really can't turn the TV on, open LinkedIn without basically getting hit in the face with kind of the urgency of climate change issues. I think there's basically like so much thirst and interest from architecture team members to get involved in this, that the gap is really in kind of building fluency and like finding critical ways to engage with the work. Basically, the solutions are out there, right? There's really like a ton of good information out there, how we proceed with solutions and building performance and carbon reductions in buildings. What I've seen is really the message getting lost in translation with how we approach those solutions. And again, I feel like this is kind of like a technical challenge. We know what needs to happen. I think we have the motivation and the industry and the interest, kind of the drive to find solutions there. Where things break down really is in the technical details. Architects are the conductors of project team, and they're running the show, making decisions. Unfortunately, we haven't been trained in that technical knowledge really to implement solutions on our own. We end up traditionally outsourcing sustainable design work to sustainable design consultants or to like a mechanical engineer if it has to do with like a systems-based solution. In my opinion, that there's basically an obstacle there for scaling. So if architects are not in the position to answer kind of those day-to-day questions that would, they're basically critical to improving building performance. For example, just understanding the thermal performance of an exterior wall assembly. Some of these simple questions that kind of continually get tossed to sustainability consultants, and that from our perspective, as sustainable design consultants, we're kind of hearing the same things over and over and over again. Every project team is asking a lot of similar questions. My kind of motivation and intent with my business was really trying to approach this work differently and more from a teaching mindset, kind of trying to find those opportunities on projects to address those really redundant questions that come up on every single project. If we can find a way for architects, really to be the ones in the driver's seat there, give them the tools and build up kind of that knowledge base so that they can answer some of the base level building performance questions for themselves. That goes a lot further. You can get a lot more mileage teaching an architect to fish with some of those questions than constantly, answering those redundant questions with every project team on every project. That's really been the inspiration and motivation for my business and kind of how I've tried to steer my practice, approaching the work from a teaching mindset. I guess the last kind of differentiating piece that we've set out to do with our work is offering scopes of work that are less traditional. we've gotten really into internal education workshops, get the information into architectural design teams' hands. You can scale the work from there. This has also really led to a lot of development of internal tools, an Excel spreadsheet or a visualization tool that's geared towards answering some of those simple questions. The obstacle is really like getting people engaged in the issues at a technical level.
Your energies and your interests are so aligned with so many other movements. You seem to be filling in that gap of what firms are asking for, what architects need. It's really inspiring to hear. Can you tell us a little bit more about your life journey? How has this sustainability become the focus of your practice?
I would say that I started my career on a pretty paved architectural path. Went to school, both undergrad and graduate school. I got architecture degrees. I focused some of my graduate education also on sustainable design. After graduating, I got a job as an architectural designer, working towards licensure, taking tests, working most traditionally like as an architectural designer, even though I was pulled in here and there in the beginning to help with sustainable design. I guess I just found myself more and more, I'd go home at night, go for a run around the lake, pour myself a glass of wine, like lay on the living room floor and watch like building performance webinars, get into environmental simulation tutorials, like learning different softwares. I found myself more and more just spending a lot of my free time teaching myself technical information, software, and I really just got obsessed with it. I kind of like jumped in with both feet on my own, really kind of like getting into that information, having had foundation of like a formal education in sustainable design, but really not a lot of the technical knowledge that you can only get through actually doing an energy model or, digging into those details. Thankfully able to kind of slowly like work a lot of the things that I was doing into the project work I was doing, kind of as much as I could get away with. I would insert, sustainable design agendas, I think, on the projects I was staffed on, and slowly started to transition my role a little bit more towards being like an internal sustainable design consultant or specialist. I think it's a challenging position. I think like there's a lot of people who find themselves there, who are working as architects who are, like really interested and like highly motivated to dig into sustainable design issues are challenged with the reality of staffing. It's difficult to be an architect full time and be a technical specialist in ultimately what is really like a separate, it's a whole separate field. It's not to say at all that those things should be separated. It's enough of a divergence, I guess, from the career path that it's worthy of its own profession. I kind of noticed, like a lot of the specific buildings or offices that I really admired that I felt like on the outside would have looked like were integrating sustainable design very well. I kind of realized that there's always basically sustainable design consultants on those projects. And so that really piqued my interest. Maybe I do want to just be a sustainable design consultant. I think I ran into the mental hurdle of sunk cost that I put into the path to become an architect. I put in a decade of work already in school. I think it took me a while to kind of let go of like the hurdle of like sunk cost there and feel like I wasn't throwing something away, essentially, committing to leaving traditional architecture practice and working exclusively as a sustainable design consultant. I'm glad I kind of like followed my gut instinct there and took the leap to work as a sustainable design consultant. I moved out to New York and worked as a sustainable design consultant for a couple of years in a pretty traditional sustainable design consultancy practice. And that really validated, I think, my decision there that sustainable design was an obsession of mine. And I was so into it, I wanted to spend all my time doing it.
It's clear you're so passionate about this, and that word obsession you threw out there, it's all encompassing. I'd love to dive deeper. At the core, what really gets you excited about these projects or your team?
I think that the projects really that, kind of excite me the most are the ones that they didn't necessarily begin with a specific sustainability objective. Often, as architects, we kind of wait for that perfect project to come along, that buildings that are from the beginning kind of have those objectives. I think the thing that is just even more inspiring than that is when you can begin on a project that didn't necessarily have those sustainable design goals, but you were able to bring the client into that just by educating them on some of the possibilities and implications of the decisions that they're making. Those have been the most inspiring projects to work on, and it's also really inspiring to have architecture firms and teams approach me just wanting to collaborate. Basically, that the architecture team just wants to move that needle. We're able to walk the client through a series of like critical decisions that are made, key building performance factors, maybe that's advanced mechanical systems or building envelope improvements, and help them see that it's not just some big picture concept like climate change or reducing carbon emissions. It's really just about making strategic decisions that are going to improve operational energy costs, going to lower your energy bill, going to make your building more durable, going to help your facade be more resilient. A lot of what we're doing it really is just best practice. It should be best practice, and it doesn't have to necessarily be put in the bucket of deep energy efficiency. You can kind of get there automatically when you really run the numbers sometimes on return on investment. I think we kind of have those opportunities to bring maybe what I just call kind of the typical day-to-day project, into the realm of something like zero energy or a goal like that. You can see pretty easily how this can and should happen on every single project. It's just kind of a matter of reframing process and having the architect have the confidence, I think, to like really talk through those issues with the client.
You seem to be taking on this role of leader almost throughout your career, but you're doing it with professionals, you're doing it with clients, you're doing it on behalf of this information that you're sharing. How do you feel like you define leadership?
There's so many fantastic examples of young female leaders in the Minneapolis design community, and I'm really lucky to work with some of those people. If I had to define kind of what makes those people good leaders, what kind of stands out is I think they're the people that kind of spend their time and effort naturally just elevating the people around them. They find themselves in a leadership position there because that just is what they're doing. They're spending their time lifting people up and providing kind of the guidance and opportunities to others, maybe even at the expense of themselves or before themselves. Yeah, I still consider myself like in the early phase of my career, and I just feel like I've seen a huge range in the direction that can go and how people end up in a leadership position.
It's fascinating to hear you describe it because I feel like you're describing yourself, but you're not calling yourself a leader. So do you think of yourself as a leader?
I would like to think that like I'm influencing people to follow some of the things that are inspiring to me. So in that way, like certainly I guess that leadership is like hopefully leading by example, just showing people what's possible.
So why is having that power, influence, or confidence so important as a leader in your work and how you're communicating with others?
I think people who are just kind of like following their passions and letting life take them on kind of that journey, like they'll naturally find that confidence in the things that they're just like so into, and like that energy can be kind of contagious or around people. It's like you don't necessarily have to be so into like thermal performance of wall assemblies as I am to like maybe get into that issue if you're around people who are excited about that and don't just feel like things are a burden to be like considered or just boring. They're kind of bringing that confidence just through like that like passion and energy. It's not because they necessarily have all the answers or know everything. It's just just the feeling that like you're gonna find a way forward and like the issue is like navigable.
When you come into these teams, you describe a type of project where you come in and the client's goals may not include sustainability, but as you're involved in talking with them and sharing your passion with them, all of a sudden they shift gears just a little bit, and some of these sustainability aspects become more core principles and decision-making factors in the client's process towards their building. And I'm curious what it feels like to have that sort of influence and what that type of leadership feels like.
Yeah, I think it's cool to find those ways basically where it's like, how are you speaking people's language? I might be coming from this issue, with a certain agenda or inspiration for why I'm pushing for one thing or another. But there's so many overlaps and like benefits for sustainable design solutions that, again, it doesn't have to be about carbon emissions or kind of like saving the planet, basically. There really are like so many overlapping benefits for so many different solutions, like electrification or increasing the efficiency of a building. So rather than even start there, it's kind of just stepping through the natural decision-making process that you would make on any building. It's like on every single building, you have to decide what your enclosure system is, and you have to decide what kind of mechanical system you're introducing into the building. It's kind of more of just like a stepping back, I think, and showing people some additional options on the table. It's like, well, maybe instead of that conventional natural gas boiler system, what if we, rather than frame it as like always an extra thing or like an added thing, what if it was just like, well, there's 3 ways this could go. Here's just what that looks like. You just run the numbers from like an energy analysis standpoint, and the decision usually makes itself. All you're showing the client is you're able to spend a little bit more money up front on, an all-electric air source heat pump system or geothermal system, but look at what you get from that, how much it safeguards you from, potential like carbon taxes in the future, and how much energy cost you're saving. I feel like a lot of these issues, they're not ones that clients are necessarily resistant to. It's just a fluency issue. People aren't necessarily putting those options on the table for the client to decide, because they're technical enough in nature that it's not an easy conversation into it often. And so then there's kind of just not an access point. If you kind of just take away that barrier and just, can explain that choice to a client, in my experience, 9 times out of 10, the client's just going to decide to do that anyways. They just didn't know that there was an option, or what kind of the pros and cons of going one way or the other would be. So it doesn't end up actually really being that hard of a sell in a lot of cases. I think it's just about opening up, kind of cracking open some issues that usually just like aren't on the table for people.
I like how you describe the fluency and talking in the terms of the values that your clients have, and the decision being clear because of the clarity you're providing the situation and the decisions you're presenting in front of them, so that they can make that choice, and empowering them in that way. We've heard a lot about your career and a little bit about running around lakes, a little wine, and a lot of passion for sustainability and this building performance in so many ways. So how are you currently finding purpose or meaning in your life? Is it different between professional and your personal life, or is it all intertwined?
You just threw this question out beforehand, and I had some time to think about it. I absolutely love it, because it's like not necessarily something I actually thought that much about until that, kind of being asked. I would say, like big picture, if I was gonna like describe my ideal life, basically, it's really one that like I could not have possibly planned or imagined, because it's so different from just like anything I think I'm gonna do or like could conceive at any moment. That basically you can look back on your life and just be like, wow, I just like never thought I would do that. Not necessarily just because you couldn't dream it up, but just like I just didn't think my life was gonna go that way. I just kind of took these twists and turns that opened up kind of all of these different experiences. Yeah, again, kind of just like, maybe to say like kind of surrendering to the journey of that. I think that basically to do that, like kind of like knowing that about myself, or just like that's what I'm looking for. I think the key there is like basically like constantly being aware of the opportunities that surround you. I think every single person, we constantly have doors opening around us, but we very often kind of choose to have like tunnel vision on what we feel like the correct path is, or maybe the path that we've kind of chosen it already. Like that decision was made for us, maybe even by us, like 4 years ago or 10 years ago, and you chose a career, you chose a place to live. I think this can be like a really hard like mental cycle to break out of, especially in a profession like architecture, that it has so much structure. You go through such a defined path of like so many years of school. There are these milestones, you have to take these tests. Like it can become become very kind of ingrained that like that's just kind of the path you're on, and it can make it hard, I think, to like look to the sides and see like value in like taking a detour or like pursuing a different path. Is kind of like, I guess in the beginning, talking about that mental hurdle of like sunk cost, and just feeling like you've invested so much into something that even if it's maybe not like the ideal thing you're doing, maybe maybe you love it, but maybe there's something else to be explored there that you're kind of blind to because you're just so kind of, you just have kind of that tunnel vision. I think, yeah, I talked about kind of how it really was kind of a hurdle to like get beyond that, like personally, to choose to, really, I mean, essentially leave the architectural profession. I remember the last day that I closed like a Revit model, and I was like, okay, that's it. I'm not, the next time I open Revit, it's going to be in a different role, and kind of having like that consciousness. And I was like, wow, I can't believe like I'm doing this. I don't know what that's going to be like. I remember talking to like my supervisors at the time, and sort of expressing that, and they were like, oh, well, you're not like leaving architecture, and I was like, no, I am. Like, I'm not going to work as an architect anymore. I'm going to work as a sustainable design consultant, and just kind of like make that decision, like make that choice. I think you got to let go, at least for me personally. Like, I had to let go of that, like those kind of preconceived notions that like that's what my life was going to be like, that was the kind of career I was going to have, and let life take you on this journey. Really allows you to see like all the doors that are constantly opening, kind of those opportunities, and have the courage to like actually do that, like step through that door and like do that. That's kind of constantly happening throughout life, and we sort of either see it or we don't, kind of thing. I think that's that kind of philosophy, I guess, I like taking that into kind of my personal life. I realized that I've made a number of like what were really like conscious decisions that have allowed me to keep as many possibilities on the table as possible. So for example, I'm 38 years old. I've never been a homeowner. I don't plan to buy a home in the near future. It's like, it seems like a small thing, but just choosing to be like a renter has allowed us to move around the country for my whole career. That decision alone has made it a lot easier to pick up and move to a different state, work in some different areas of the country, live in New York. Giving yourself the opportunity or like ability to like take a leap of faith when you don't really have a plan, I guess, but it's like, well, I just know I want to do something different. So basically we put our stuff in storage, just moved around for what ended up being 2 years. We just picked a city to live in for basically like 2 to 3 months, found temporary housing there, and just kind of moved around the country. We're not independently wealthy. We were working remotely that whole time, basically just trading the cost of rent for the cost of temporary housing in these different areas. So whole thing ended up being financially a wash, and we just got to have all these cool experiences and live in cities all over the country that I probably wouldn't have even necessarily visited all of them. They're just kind of like, well, we're driving, we're moving around the country, so we're kind of just like stopping in these different places. We lived in the central coast of California for I guess like almost a year, learned to surf out there, and just kind of did a bunch of stuff that like, it wasn't because it was like on my bucket list, I guess. It was more just kind of like opportunity presents itself, and you can kind of take it. So I think there's some of those things that you kind of don't realize you're making those choices maybe in the moment, but just finding a way to leave your options open in life so that it can just be about something bigger than you originally imagined.
I specifically love how you said embrace the journey, and how you're describing how that's taken root in your life and how it's shaped your own decisions. As you've lived through this career and this total shift of a career, I mean, you were on the railroad and you decided to get off and you're not on the tracks anymore, and seeing the world differently, not seeing that tunnel vision, but seeing the possibilities beyond. And so it's fascinating to hear how you've navigated that and how everything seems like it's laid out before you. Like there's one thing you do after another, and then you get that name architect, and then so many possibilities open up, and you've just really embraced those possibilities, tested so many options. It's really, really fun. So has your satisfaction in your career changed from being an architectural designer and then architect and now consultant?
I would say probably it's been a path to just get closer and closer to kind of like your core interests. For me, architecture starts so broadly. There's very traditional roles like to be found in architecture, but it's really like this huge profession, and there's all these different pathways within it. I think, kind of early on, like I knew I had sort of this interest in sustainable design, and getting like closer and closer like to that through different steps in my career does just feel like, yeah, just kind of reaching like better alignment in kind of like your sense of purpose. It feels like it's stuff I wake up and just want to do in the morning, and the kind of that true, like, it doesn't it doesn't feel like work. This just feels like passion and interest. So I think definitely, finding a way to kind of pave my own pathway through that was probably essential. I don't know that I really would have found like a specific role that existed out there that I could have stepped into and necessarily felt that same kind of satisfaction. I think it probably took, for me kind of like jumping into my own like self-directed work to really do what feels like kind of like that, yeah, that like kind of core interest and passion. And I think that like that was a challenge for me, and I think for a lot of people that maybe there's like, I do feel like I really struggled to find mentors who were really kind of direct like role models. There were people within like architecture, the world of design, and then there were people within more technical worlds of like engineering who were role models, but it was kind of never like, I could never really look at like one person necessarily and see myself there, or see their career and like what I wanted to do. So kind of was more this mashup of different interests that combined architectural design inspiration influences with like deep technical approaches to work. I think that, hopefully that is changing a little bit. I do feel like even in the 15 years since I sort of like began this journey, that there's a little bit more blending happening, and hopefully that's a little bit, there's kind of some additional pathways like open to people who want to like bridge those worlds a little bit. Yeah, I would say like, I kind of had to find like a bunch of different mentors and have them, have each of those people inspired me in just like totally different ways. It was harder to find like a single person.
So what is one thing you want to see before you die?
There's something you want to see before you die, like just go do it like right now. Don't have bucket lists. If there's something you want to do, go do it like this year.
So is there anything you're currently listening to, reading, or watching that inspires you that you'd like to share?
In the world of Passive House, which is a sustainable building standard, there's really a community of architects and engineers together in kind of the Passive House world that have started to create some really incredible resources that I feel like speak architect a little bit better. One of those is the Passive House Accelerator. They have weekly webinars, and they're focused on high performance buildings and Passive House.
Well, Molly, thank you. This has been an incredible conversation, and we really dove deep into that sense of meaning and purpose in life. You are forging your path in this. That is such an inspiring story, and you are a leader. Thank you for joining us. This interview was prepared for the Women's Search for Meaning in and Beyond Architecture session. The networking portion of this session will take place on November 13th at the AIA Minnesota 2023 Conference on Architecture. The AIA Women in Architecture Committee prepared this mini-series to share the stories of 6 women and their unique paths into leadership. Our hope is to inspire your own search for meaning in and beyond architectural practice.